Deathworlders respond to aliens' SOS with a Merciless Armada Part 1. The distress signal had been screaming across space for 6 days. It came from a small blue planet called Velen Prime, and it carried the sound of a dying world. The Volani were a peaceful species. They stood about 4 feet tall, with soft blue skin that glowed gently in the dark. They had large eyes that could see colors no human would ever know. For 10,000 years, they had built a civilization based on art, music, and the growing of beautiful crystal trees that sang when the wind touched them. They had no army. They had no weapons. They had never needed such things. The Volani believed that all thinking beings were good at heart. They believed that kindness would always win against cruelty. They were wrong. The Kreth came without warning. Their ships blocked out the sun over the capital city. Their soldiers marched through the crystal forests, burning everything they touched. The Kreth were conquerors. They had destroyed 47 species before the Volani. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who stood in their way. The Volani tried to talk. They tried to offer gifts. They tried to understand what they had done wrong. The Kreth laughed at them and continued killing. Elder Luminara, the oldest and wisest of the Volani, sent out the distress signal herself. She sat in a small room in a burning building and spoke into an old communication device. Her voice shook as she begged the galaxy for help. "Please," she said, "we are dying. Our children are dying. Anyone who can hear this, please help us. We have done nothing wrong. We just want to live." The signal traveled across the stars. It reached 100 different species on 100 different worlds. The Galactic Council, a group of the most powerful civilizations in known space, received the message and called an emergency meeting. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in a great hall. They watched recordings of the Kreth burning Volani cities. They saw families running through the streets. They saw children crying for parents who would never come. And then they did nothing. "The Kreth are too powerful," said the representative from the Tyranny Collective. "We cannot risk war. Perhaps we could negotiate," suggested the ambassador from the Meldari Republic. "Offer them trade agreements. Find a peaceful solution." "The Volani have no strategic value," said another voice. "Why should we sacrifice our soldiers for them?" The debate continued for hours. No one wanted to act. No one wanted to take the risk. The Volani would have to save themselves, and everyone in that room knew they could not. But the distress signal had reached another world. A world that the Galactic Council preferred not to think about. A world called Earth. Admiral Helena Vance stood on the bridge of her warship, the UE's Prometheus. She was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much death. She had fought in 3 wars and lost friends on a dozen different battlefields. She was tired of fighting, but she was more tired of watching innocent people die. The distress signal played on the main screen. She watched a Volani mother holding her child as Kreth soldiers closed in around them. The mother's skin was glowing bright with fear. The child's face was buried in her chest. "How far?" Vance asked quietly. Her navigation officer checked his screens. 14 hours at maximum speed, Admiral. But command has not given us permission to... "Get me command," Vance said. "Right now." The call went through in minutes. On Earth, the leaders of the United Human Nations were watching the same footage. They saw the burning cities. They saw the bodies in the streets. They saw a species being wiped out while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Humans knew this story. They had lived it many times in their history. They had been the victims. They had been the killers. They had watched as neighbors slaughtered neighbors while the world stood by. After the worst of those times, humanity had made a promise. Never again. Never again would they stand by while innocents died. Never again would they look away from evil because fighting it was too hard. The order came from Earth within the hour. It was not a suggestion. It was not a request. It was a command. All available forces will proceed to Velen Prime immediately. You are authorized to use any means necessary to stop the killing. Bring them home safe. Admiral Vance read the order twice. Then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had finally been allowed to hunt. Signal all ships, she said. We're going to war. Across human space, 400 warships changed course at the same moment. The First Fleet, the Second Fleet, the Third Fleet, 70,000 soldiers. The greatest military force humanity had ever sent to a single target. They were not going to negotiate. They were not going to ask politely. They were going to Velen Prime, and they were going to make the Kreth pay for every life they had taken. The Galactic Council detected the human fleet 3 hours into their journey. They watched in shock as ship after ship appeared on their tracking screens. They had never seen humans deploy such a force. What are they doing? Asked the Tyranny representative. Do they not understand how powerful the Kreth are? They are Deathworlders, said another voice, speaking the word like a curse. They come from a planet that should have killed them. They do not think like us. They do not fear like us. Should we stop them? Warn them? The room fell silent. No one wanted to get in the way of the human fleet. No one wanted to draw their attention. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Vance watched the stars streak past her window. In 14 hours, she would reach Velen Prime. In 14 hours, she would face an enemy that had conquered 47 species without losing a single battle. She was not afraid. She was angry. Get some rest, she told her crew. Tomorrow, we show the galaxy what happens when you hurt people who cannot defend themselves. Tomorrow, we remind the Kreth why they should have stayed away from the Deathworlders. The fleet flew on through the darkness. Behind them, Earth watched and waited. Ahead of them, the Volani prayed for a miracle they did not believe would come. They had no idea what was about to happen. Deathworlders respond to Alien SOS with a Merciless Armada Part 2. The Deathworlders' Wart Dexon stood in his command center and felt pleased with himself. The conquest of Velen Prime was going perfectly. His soldiers had already captured 3 major cities. The processing camps were filling with prisoners. Soon, the entire planet would belong to the Kreth Dominion. Dexon was a massive creature. He stood over 9 feet tall, covered in hard black armor that grew from his own body. His forearms ended in claws that could cut through metal. His face was a nightmare of sharp edges and glowing red eyes. He had commanded the Kreth military for 30 years and had never lost a battle. The Volani had been even easier to conquer than he expected. They did not fight back. They did not even try to run. They simply stood there with their glowing skin, begging for mercy that would never come. Weak creatures, Dexon said to his officers. They do not deserve to exist. When we are done here, nothing will remain of their pathetic civilization. His officers clicked their jaws in agreement. The Kreth had no respect for weakness. In their culture, the strong took what they wanted, and the weak died. This was the natural order of things. Then a communication officer rushed into the room. His armor had turned a pale gray color, which meant he was afraid. Dexon had never seen one of his officers show fear. War Master, the officer said, we have detected a large fleet approaching our position. Over 400 ships. Dexon's eyes narrowed. Which species? The Tyranny? The Meldari? No, War Master. They are. The officer hesitated. They are Terran ships. Human ships. The room went silent. Every Kreth in the command center stopped what they were doing. They all knew about the Terrans. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. Humans came from Earth. a planet that the galactic community classified as a Class 12 death world. This was the highest danger rating possible. Earth was a planet of extremes: burning deserts, frozen wastelands, oceans full of predators, storms that could destroy entire cities. The gravity was so strong that most species could not even stand up on its surface. Any normal species would have died on such a world. The humans did not die. They survived. They adapted. They conquered their planet the same way they conquered everything else, with violence and stubbornness and a refusal to accept defeat. The Kreth had studied humans carefully. They had watched how humans fought their wars. They had seen the recordings of human soldiers charging into certain death rather than surrendering. They had heard the stories of human warriors who kept fighting even after losing limbs, even after being shot multiple times. Thought the Kreth were proud of their strength. But they were not stupid. They had deliberately avoided human space in all their conquests. Some targets were not worth the cost. Why are they coming here? Dexon demanded. We have no conflict with the Terrans. I do not know, War Master. But they are moving at maximum speed. They will arrive in approximately 8 hours. Dexon turned to his communication screen. Hail them. Find out what they want. The message was sent. The response came back quickly. It appeared on the main screen in simple text, translated into the Kreth language. This is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Earth Navy. You are engaged in the murder of innocent civilians. You have 12 hours to withdraw all forces from Vellum Prime. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. If you are still here when we arrive, we will destroy you. You have been warned. Dexon read the message 3 times. Then he began to laugh. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together. They threaten us? These soft-skinned animals threaten the Kreth Dominion? He turned to his officers. We have 200 ships in this system. We have conquered species 10 times more powerful than these humans. They think their little fleet can frighten us? His officers clicked their jaws nervously. They were not as confident as their leader. War Master, one of them said carefully, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. The humans are known to be unpredictable, and their ships are nothing. Dexon roared. I will not run from Deathworlders like a frightened child. We will crush them the same way we crushed every other species that tried to stop us. He began issuing orders. All Kreth ships would form a defensive line around Vellum Prime. Ground forces would prepare for possible invasion. The humans would see the full might of the Dominion, and they would regret their arrogance. What Dexon did not understand was that humans were different from every other species the Kreth had faced. Other species fought for territory, for resources, for power. They calculated costs and benefits. They knew when to retreat. Humans did not think that way. When humans saw innocent people being killed, something happened inside them. Something old and powerful and very dangerous. They stopped calculating. They stopped thinking about cost. They only thought about one thing: making it stop. The human fleet was not coming to Vellum Prime for resources. They had no interest in Kreth territory. They were coming because they had seen children crying in burning cities. They were coming because they had heard a mother begging for help. They were coming because their entire history had taught them one terrible lesson. Evil wins when good people do nothing. Admiral Vance sat in her command chair, reviewing battle plans with her officers. Around her, the fleet prepared for war. Soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots ran final diagnostics on their fighters. Medical teams prepared for the wounded that would soon fill their beds. Admiral, her second officer said, the Kreth have not withdrawn. They appear to be forming a battle line. Vance nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Kreth were too proud to run. They had never lost a battle, so they could not imagine losing one now. That was about to change. "Signal all ships," she said. "We going hard and fast. Primary targets are their command vessels. I want their leadership dead in the first 5 minutes. Secondary targets are any ship firing on the planet. After that, we destroy everything that moves. Rules of engagement, Admiral." Vance looked at the screen showing Vellum Prime. Even from space, she could see the fires burning across the planet's surface. She could see the dark shapes of Kreth ships hovering over the cities like vultures. "No mercy," she said quietly. "They showed none to the Vellani. They will receive none from us." The fleet accelerated. In 8 hours, they would reach Vellum Prime. In 8 hours, the Kreth would learn what it meant to anger the Deathworlders. Dexon would not survive to regret his choice. Deathworlders respond to alien SOS with a Merciless Armada Part 3. The storm breaks. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 412 warships appeared in the space above Vellum Prime at the exact same moment, spreading out like the fingers of a giant hand reaching for the Kreth. War Master Dexon watched them arrive on his screen. For the first time in 30 years, he felt something cold in his stomach. It might have been fear. He refused to admit it. Human ships were ugly. Every other species in the galaxy built beautiful vessels with smooth curves and elegant designs. Human ships looked like they had been built by angry blacksmiths. They were all harsh angles and thick armor, covered in weapons that pointed in every direction. They did not look like ships. They looked like weapons themselves. Admiral Vance opened a channel one final time. Her voice was calm and cold. "Kreth forces, this is Admiral Vance. You have one final chance. Tower down your weapons and surrender your ships. Any resistance will be met with total destruction. You have 5 minutes to comply." Dexon laughed at the message. "Destroy them all," he ordered. 200 Kreth ships opened fire at once. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked across space toward the human fleet. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It should have been enough to cripple any enemy. The human ships did not even slow down. Point defense systems activated across the fleet. Thousands of small guns tracked the incoming fire and shot it out of space. The plasma bolts exploded harmlessly, creating a wall of light between the two fleets. Through that wall, the human ships kept coming. "Return fire," Vance said. Not-human weapons were different from anything the galaxy had seen. They did not use plasma or lasers. They used railguns, weapons that fired solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. These slugs hit their targets with the force of small nuclear bombs. The first, Kreth, ship exploded before its crew even understood what had hit them. The railgun round punched through their shields, through their armor, and through their reactor. The ship became a ball of fire in less than a second. Then another ship died. And another. And another. Dexon watched his fleet being torn apart. "How is this possible?" he screamed. "Our shields should stop their weapons." His officers had no answer. Human weapons did not care about shields. They were too fast, too heavy, too brutal. They simply smashed through everything in their path. But the real nightmare had not yet begun. Human dropships launched from the carrier vessels. Each one carried a squad of Marines in powered armor. These soldiers were not like the fragile creatures the Kreth usually faced. They were wrapped in metal suits that made them nearly as strong as the Kreth themselves. And they were very, very angry. Sergeant Marcus Cole led his squad onto a Kreth battleship. They cut through the hull with plasma torches and climbed inside. The corridor was dark and filled with the smell of burning metal. Perfect. "Contact front," someone shouted. A group of Kreth warriors charged down the corridor. They were huge, terrifying creatures with claws and fangs and armor made of their own bone. They had slaughtered thousands of enemies in close combat. The Marines opened fire. Human rifles fired explosive rounds that could punch through tank armor. The first wave of Kreth warriors went down in a spray of dark blood. More came behind them, climbing over their fallen comrades. The Marines did not retreat. They walked forward, firing steadily, stepping over bodies as they advanced. A Kreth warrior reached Cole and swung a massive claw at his head. Cole ducked under the blow and drove his combat knife into the creature's throat. The Kreth was dead before it hit the ground. "Keep moving," Cole ordered. "Ridge is 2 levels up." On another ship, Private Yuki Tanaka fought alone. Her squad had been killed in the initial breach, but she kept going. A plasma blast burned away her helmet, exposing her face to the ship's atmosphere. It was thin and cold, hard to breathe. She did not care. She found a group of Kreth guarding a doorway and charged them with her knife in hand. They were twice her size. She killed 3 of them before they brought her down. Even then, she kept fighting from the floor, slashing at their legs until another Marine squad arrived to save her. The Kreth had never seen anything like this. They were supposed to be the strongest warriors in the galaxy. They were supposed to be unstoppable. But these humans refused to die. They ignored wounds that should have killed them. They fought with a fury that made no sense. Corporal James Okonkwo held a corridor for 11 minutes against 20 Kreth warriors. Behind him were a dozen Vellani civilians that his squad had found hiding in the ship's cargo hold. The Kreth had been planning to send them to a processing camp. Okonkwo was not going to let that happen. He stood in the center of the corridor, firing his rifle until it ran out of ammunition. Then he drew his pistol and kept firing. When that was empty, he picked up a piece of metal pipe and used it as a club. The Kreth kept coming. He kept killing them. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found Okonkwo standing over a pile of Kreth bodies. His armor was cracked in a dozen places. He was bleeding from wounds he had not even noticed. Behind him, the Vellani civilians huddled together, glowing with fear and hope. "Thought you might need some help," the reinforcement leader said. Okonkwo shook his head. "I had it under control. But get these people to safety." The battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, the Kreth fleet was destroyed. 193 ships turned into debris floating in space. Thousands of Kreth warriors dead, either on their own ships or on the human vessels they had tried to board. War Master Dexon died on the bridge of his flagship. He had watched his entire fleet die around him. He had seen his best warriors fall to human Marines. At the end, when the humans cut through his door, he tried to fight. A Marine shot him twice in the chest and once in the head. Admiral Vance received the report with no emotion. "Begin landing operations," she ordered. "We still have work to do on the ground." The human fleet had lost 37 soldiers. Every name was recorded. Every sacrifice was remembered. But the battle was won. The Kreth would never threaten Vellum Prime again. Deathworlders respond to Alien SOS with a Merciless Armada Part 4. The Liberation. The dropships came down like rain across Vellum Prime, but they did not bring destruction. They brought hope. Dr. Sarah Chun had not slept in 2 days. She stood in a field hospital that her team had built from nothing, surrounded by wounded Vellani who needed her help. The aliens were so different from humans. Their blood was silver instead of red. Their organs were in strange places. Their bones bent in ways that human bones could not. None of that mattered. Chun was a doctor. She would save lives, no matter what species those lives belonged to. A young Vellani child lay on the table in front of her. The child had been caught in a burning building when the Kreth attacked. Her skin was damaged, and her glow was very weak. In Vellani culture, a weak glow meant the person was close to death. Chun worked for 3 hours on that child. She used human medicines that had never been tested on Villani. She made guesses about Villani biology based on what little information she had. She refused to give up. When the child finally opened her eyes, her glow had returned to full strength. She looked up at Chen with huge eyes filled with wonder. "You saved me," the child whispered. Chen smiled, even though she was so tired she could barely stand. "That's what we do," she said. Across the planet, similar scenes played out in 100 different places. Human soldiers who had been killing Kreth an hour ago now walked carefully to destroyed cities, searching for survivors. They carried medical supplies on their backs. They gave their own food to starving Villani. They wrapped injured children in their jackets to keep them warm. Sergeant Cole found a group of Villani hiding in a basement. They screamed when they saw him, thinking he was another monster come to hurt them. He took off his helmet so they could see his face. Then he knelt down to their level and spoke softly. "It's okay," he said. "The bad guys are gone. We're here to help." The Villani did not understand his words, but they understood his tone. One by one, they came out of hiding. Cole led them to safety, carrying a small child in his arms the entire way. The processing camps were the worst. The Kreth had gathered thousands of Villani in these places, planning to send them to other worlds as slaves. When the Marines opened the gates, they found people who had given up all hope. They found families separated. They found children alone, not knowing if their parents were alive or dead. Private Tanaka, her face still bandaged from the battle, worked in one of these camps for 12 hours straight. She reunited families. She made lists of the missing. She held the hands of those who had no one else to hold. "Why are you doing this?" A Villani elder asked her. "You do not know us. You came from so far away. Why do you care?" Tanaka thought about the question. Her grandfather had told her stories about Earth's history. Stories about times when people had been treated like the Villani were being treated. Stories about camps and cruelty and the worst things humans had ever done to each other. "Because we know what this is like," she said finally. "We have been where you are. We have suffered like you are suffering. And we promised ourselves that we would never let it happen again. Not to anyone." The elder's glow brightened with emotion she could not name. In her 10,000 years of life, she had never met a species like these humans. They were terrifying and gentle. They were killers and healers. They did not make sense. Elder Luminara finally found the courage to meet Admiral Vance. The Admiral had come down to the surface to inspect the relief efforts. She walked through the destroyed streets, her uniform covered in dust and ash, talking to soldiers and civilians alike. Luminara approached her with shaking steps. Vance was tall for a human, and there was something in her eyes that made Luminara afraid. This was a being who had just destroyed an entire fleet without hesitation. This was a killer. "Admiral Vance," Luminara said, "I must ask you something." Vance turned to look at her. Her expression softened slightly. "Of course. Why did you come?" "The Galactic Council ignored our call. Other species ignored our call. We have nothing to offer you. No resources. No technology. No power. We are a small, weak species that could not even defend itself. Why did you risk so much for us?" Vance was quiet for a long moment. Behind her, human soldiers were working to put out fires in the crystal forest. The trees were dying, but some could still be saved. "Because you asked for help," Vance said simply. "And because we could give it. But the cost," Luminara pressed. "Your soldiers died for us. Your ships were damaged. Your people will mourn." 37, Vance said quietly. "We lost 37 people today. I know all their names. I will write letters to all their families. And it will hurt because they were good people who died too young." She looked directly at Luminara. But every single one of them chose to be here. They knew the risk. They came anyway, because they believed that protecting innocent lives was worth dying for. That is who we are. Luminara felt tears forming in her large eyes. Your species is strange to me. You are so violent, so dangerous, but you are also kind. I do not understand how both things can be true. Humans are complicated, Vance admitted. We have done terrible things throughout our history. We have hurt each other in ways I cannot describe. But we have also learned from those mistakes. We know what evil looks like because we have been evil. And we have decided that we will not let that evil win. Not anymore. Not anywhere. She reached out and gently touched Luminara's shoulder. You are safe now. We will help you rebuild. And if anyone ever threatens your people again, we will come back. That is a promise. Luminara believed her. Looking into those hard, kind eyes, she believed every word. The humans stayed on Velen Prime for 3 months. They rebuilt cities. They healed the wounded. They planted new crystal trees to replace the ones that had burned. When they finally left, the Velani gathered to watch their ships rise into the sky. For the first time in their history, the Velani understood that they were not alone in the universe. Somewhere out there, among the stars, the Deathworlders were watching, and they would always answer the call for help. Deathworlders respond to Alien SOS with a Merciless Armada Part 5. The message news of the Battle of Velen Prime spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species in known space had heard the story. Within weeks, everything had changed. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from 100 different civilizations. They had come to discuss the human problem. What had happened at Velen Prime was unprecedented. A species had intervened in another species' conflict without permission, without consultation, without any regard for galactic law. The Tyranni representative stood to speak first. His species had been one of the oldest members of the Council. They had always believed that non-interference was the wisest policy. The humans have committed an act of war, he declared. They attacked the sovereign power without provocation. They destroyed an entire fleet. If we allow this to stand, they will do it again. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Then another voice spoke up. It was the Velani ambassador, attending her first council meeting. Her species had never been important enough to have a seat before. An act of war? She said, the Kreth were murdering our people. They were burning our cities. They were taking our children to be slaves. We sent a distress signal to this council. We begged for help. And what did you do? She looked around the chamber at all the representatives who had voted to ignore her people's suffering. Nothing. You did nothing. You calculated the costs and decided we were not worth saving. And you would have let us die. But the humans heard our call. They came from the other side of the galaxy to help people they had never met. They died for us. They bled for us. Her glow brightened with anger. Do not speak to me about acts of war. The humans did what none of you had the courage to do. They acted. The chamber fell silent. No one knew how to respond. On Earth, the government was dealing with a flood of messages from across the galaxy. Some were threats from species allied with the Kreth. Some were expressions of concern from neutral powers. But many were different. Many were thank you notes. Slave species that the Kreth had conquered 30 years ago sent a message praising human courage. A group of refugees hiding in an asteroid field asked if humans could help them too. Dozens of small, weak species that had always lived in fear suddenly felt something new. They felt hope. The Kreth Dominion was in chaos. War Master Dexon had been their greatest leader. Their fleet had been their greatest weapon. Both were gone. The species that had conquered 47 worlds was suddenly vulnerable. Other Kreth leaders argued about what to do. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted to retreat to their home systems and rebuild. But all of them agreed on one thing. The humans were the most dangerous species they had ever encountered. Any future conflict would be avoided at all costs. 3 days after the battle, the United Earth government broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. It was translated into every known language and transmitted on every frequency. There was no way to ignore it. President Maria Santos stood in front of a camera and spoke clearly. To all species of the galaxy, I am President Maria Santos of Earth. You have seen what our forces did at Velen Prime. You have heard the stories. Some of you are afraid of us now. Others are angry. I understand. We are humans. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence. We survived by being stubborn, by being clever, and by refusing to give up. These qualities made us strong. They also made us dangerous, but there is something else about humans that you should know. We care. We look at the stars and we see not just resources to take, but people to help. We see the weak being crushed by the strong, and something inside us refuses to accept it. For too long, we have watched the strong prey upon the weak in this galaxy. We have seen empires built on slavery. We have seen species wiped out while others stood by. We have seen the Galactic Council debate and discuss while innocent people died. We will not stand by anymore. From this day forward, any distress call will be answered. Any species that attacks innocents will face consequences. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want to tell other species how to live. But we will not allow genocide. We will not allow slavery. We will not allow the strong to murder the weak simply because they can to those who would prey upon the helpless. We have a simple message. We are watching. We are ready. And if you cross the line, we are coming to those who live in fear, who hide from those more powerful than themselves, who have given up hope that anyone cares about their suffering. We have another message. You are not alone. The Deathworlders are here, and we will fight for you. This is humanity's promise to the galaxy. We will be the immune system. We will be the protectors. We will be the ones who answer when no one else will. Consider yourselves warned. The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings sat in stunned silence. The Kreth began fortifying their borders immediately. 17 other aggressive species did the same. The era of easy conquest was over, but in the dark corners of the galaxy, on 100 oppressed worlds, something wonderful was happening. Species that had never dared to hope began looking up at the stars. They began sending messages to Earth. They began to believe that someone might actually care about them. On Velen Prime, Elder Luminara watched the recording of President Santos's speech. She had been crying since it started. Her glow was brighter than it had been in years. They mean it, she said to herself. They actually mean it. A young Velani child, the same one that Dr. Chen had saved, climbed into Luminara's lap. The child had been following humans around for weeks, fascinated by these strange creatures who had saved her world. Elder, the child asked, will the humans come back? Luminara hugged the child close. If we ever need them, they will come. They promised. The child smiled. I like the humans. They are scary, but they are also nice. Luminara laughed through her tears. Yes, they are. They are both things at once. Far away, the human fleet was already heading home. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, looking at the stars. 37 of her people had died at Velen Prime. She would remember them forever, but she had also saved an entire species. She had shown the galaxy that humanity would not stand by while innocents suffered. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that they would do it again, because that was who humans were: dangerous, stubborn, complicated, and absolutely, completely unwilling to let evil win, the galaxy would never be the same.